All right, let's jump right in. Today we're diving into UK education. More specifically, we're taking a look at OFSTED, the Office for Standards in Education, Children's Services and Skills. They're the ones who inspect schools in England.
Right.
And their reports, well, they have a big impact, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Their judgments can really make or break a school. Funding, teacher morale, it all hinges on these reports. And parents, they definitely pay attention when they're choosing schools.
Right. Makes sense.
So yeah, it's pretty important to understand how OFSTED works.
For sure. And that's actually why we're looking at this recent article from TES. TES, that leading UK education publication.
Yeah, I know it.
Well, they raised some serious concerns about OFSTED's governance, essentially how the whole organization is run.
Interesting. And the timing is, interesting to say the least. Because OFSTED is making some big changes, like dropping those single word grades, remember?
Oh, right.
And introducing that whole new inspection framework.
Yeah. Yep.
But this article, it argues that there are deeper issues, kind of foundational problems.
So it's like they're saying, hold on, let's not get distracted by a new coat of paint if the foundations are shaky.
Exactly. Like they're worried about how much power the chief inspector has, and how much oversight the board provides. It's all about accountability, making sure OFSTED's working for everyone.
Right, and the article points to this report by Dame Christine Gilbert, a former chief inspector.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And her findings are, pretty startling. She says the OFSTED board's role is curiously limited.
Curiously limited, huh? That's a loaded phrase, isn't it? Why would the board, the group that's supposed to be overseeing OFSTED, have a limited role?
Well, she argues that the current system gives way too much power to the chief inspector and not enough to the board. And get this, the board doesn't even control OFSTED's budget.
Whoa, really? That's like trying to steer a ship without any control over the engine, right? Or the rudder. How can they oversee anything if they can't influence finances? Or the direction?
That's a good point. And that lack of accountability, it really worries Professor Colin Richards.
Oh, right. He's one of the former inspectors quoted in the article.
Yeah. He's concerned that important issues affecting education standards could be kind of swept under the rug.
Oh, I see.
Because of this governance problem.
Yeah, that's understandable. If there are problems within OFSTED, or if the chief inspector, if they have biases, then who's going to challenge them? Who's holding them accountable?
Right. It's like having a referee who's also playing on one of the teams.
Exactly.
Doesn't seem fair.
And that sense of fairness is crucial.
Yeah.
Especially in a system that has such a huge impact on people's lives.
Yeah, for sure.
The lack of transparency, accountability, it just breeds mistrust.
Yeah. And Frank Norris, another former inspector, he's concerned about how the OFSTED chair and board members are appointed. They're chosen by the education secretary.
Right.
Which makes you wonder about their independence.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. If people in charge of overseeing OFSTED, if they're handpicked by the government, then it makes you wonder, can they really act independently? Could they be pressured to put the government's agenda first, even if it's not what's best for schools?
Right. And an OFSTED is seen as like a political tool rather than an objective body.
Yeah.
Well, that undermines the public's trust in the whole system, right? Teachers, parents, everyone needs to believe that OFSTED's acting fairly.
Yeah.
And that their judgments are based on, evidence, not politics.
Absolutely. Because if people lose faith in the system, then it becomes much harder to achieve the goal, the goal of making sure all children are getting a good education.
For sure. And speaking of things that undermine public trust, the article also talks about how the chief inspector is appointed. They suggest giving more power to the Commons Education Select Committee. Maybe even letting them veto the government's choice.
Wow. Okay. That's a pretty bold idea, isn't it? On one hand, it could lead to a more independent chief inspector, someone who's not beholden to the government,
Right.
But on the other hand, it could politicize the process in a different way. Like, what if Parliament gets too involved? Could OFSTED become, like a pawn in political battles?
Yeah, that's true.
There's no easy answer there, is there?
I guess not. Yeah, it's a tricky balance for sure. You want the system to be both independent and accountable. But finding that sweet spot, it's not easy. And, all of this isn't just theoretical. These concerns about OFSTED's governance, they're playing out against a backdrop of real human stories.
That's a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in these big debates about structures and processes and all that. But at the end of the day, this is all about real people, teachers, students, families. Their lives are being affected.
Yeah, and the article reminds us of that. By bringing up the big listen consultation that OFSTED did, they were asking for feedback on the inspection system, especially after, the death of head teacher Ruth Perry, which a lot of people believe was partly due to the stress of an OFSTED inspection.
Yeah, that was a real tragedy. It really shook the education community, and it really made people think about the human cost of these inspections.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, is the system doing more harm than good?
Right.
And the article also mentions that some former inspectors, they launched something called the alternative big listen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they felt like OFSTED's own consultation, it felt like it wasn't digging deep enough.
I see.
They wanted to ask some fundamental questions.
Like what?
Well, is the whole inspection system even fit for purpose? Should we completely rethink how we evaluate schools and how we support school improvement?
That's interesting. Sometimes it feels like we're so focused on tweaking the existing system,
Yeah.
changing the grading scales or revising the framework, that we forget to step back and look at the bigger picture. Like, are there other models out there?
Yeah.
Ones that might be more effective, less stressful?
Right, because ultimately, the goal is to make sure all children are getting a good education.
Mm-hmm.
But is the current OFSTED system the best way to achieve that?
It's a tough question.
Some critics would say it's creating a culture of fear and anxiety.
Right, and that's not helpful for anyone.
It might even be hindering progress.
Yeah, I think these concerns about OFSTED's governance, they're really important. If the system isn't seen as fair, if there's not enough transparency, then it creates this feeling that the deck is stacked against schools.
That's a good way to put it.
And that just leads to demoralization and disillusionment.
It makes you wonder if there are other ways to approach this, like maybe systems that focus more on collaboration.
Right, more support, less judgment.
Yeah, and maybe less punishment.
Definitely.
Maybe we can even learn from other countries.
Yeah, there are definitely other models out there. It's worth exploring, for sure.
So for our listeners out there, we really encourage you to keep digging, keep asking these questions, and keep the conversation going. The future of education, it depends on it. Yeah, it's like we're, trying to solve this really complex equation, but with way too many variables.
Yeah.
We want schools to be accountable, but we also want to be supportive and fair.
Right.
We need a way to measure how effective schools are.
Yeah.
But without, crushing everyone's morale.
It's a challenge, for sure.
It really is.
And it's not just a challenge here in the UK. I mean, lots of countries are dealing with this.
Right.
And the article mentions, just briefly, some alternative models.
Oh, yeah. From other countries?
Yeah, systems that might give us a different perspective,
Right, like systems that focus more on collaboration.
Uh-huh.
And continuous improvement, rather than just top-down judgment.
Exactly.
I think it would be really interesting to look at those more closely.
Yeah, for sure.
See what we can learn,
I agree. It's always good to look beyond our own little world and see how other people are doing things.
Absolutely. It could spark some new ideas.
For sure.
Going back to the appointment process, the article had that, pretty radical idea about giving more power to the Commons Education Select Committee when it comes to choosing the chief inspector.
Oh, right.
Maybe even letting them, veto the government's choice.
Yeah, that's going to be controversial. But, it does address the concern about political influence.
Right.
But then it raises the question of whether Parliament should be so involved.
Yeah, it's like we're choosing between two imperfect options. Do we risk the government interfering, or do we risk Parliament getting too involved?
Yeah, it's tough.
It really is.
I think it just highlights how complex this all is. There's no easy fix.
Definitely not.
No magic bullet.
Right.
It's about finding the right balance.
Within a system that, has limitations.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like we've uncovered more questions than answers.
But maybe that's okay.
Yeah,
sometimes just understanding the complexity is a good first step.
True.
Recognizing the nuances, the trade-offs, the different perspectives.
Yeah.
It helps us avoid those simplistic solutions.
And embrace the messiness.
Exactly.
So to our listeners, we hope this has given you a new way to think about the education system. Keep asking those tough questions. Look at those different models out there. And keep talking about how to create a system that really works for everyone.
Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. The future of education depends on us challenging the status quo, thinking critically, and always trying to improve.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.